Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. March 6th. There we go. 2019. Time for another show. Not that my computers know it. Having some renewed difficulty today with the now ancient MacBook Pro laptop that used to run the show and is now the backup, but isn't working, so won't be able to back us up very well. But it's got me so distracted, along with some other crazy things happening this morning, that, I just absolutely missed the button. I mean, I totally whiffed on getting the start of the show underway in the soundboard. That is weird. So, okay, we'll try and recover from that, and I will look for a way later on to make up 7 or so seconds for when we are putting together the podcast and all this. Luckily, we have with us Greg Dworkin, not quite yet, but Greg Dworkin, and later on Joan McCarter to try and help carry us through this chaotic day. Very important things falling apart this morning. One of the things that's going to get in the way of, well, for one thing, I'm going to keep one eye on this thing and see if it's crashing again and see if it even starts up. If it doesn't start up, I'm going to have tremendous difficulty monitoring all of our input channels, including Twitter. But I'm sure we will be able to make do. We at least have our Pocket list, and our Skype is working, so we shouldn't have any difficulty with that. But, man, all right, well, this is like I said, it's kind of an ancient laptop. Might be time to replace this, and, it's difficult. That's one of the things that happens with running a podcast/radio show on a shoestring budget. I really gotta eliminate more shoestrings, I guess. It's the entitlements, clearly, that are causing the problem, and all the poor people are going to have to be punished for this one. You know how this stuff goes. However, the good news is we can pay for a new computer system here by cutting taxes, so I believe everything will work out in the end. Okay, among many things going wrong this morning, including having the wrong orange juice in this household, which causes a tremendous difficulty for the kids with such texture sensitivities. There's some pulp in my orange juice. I know, because the people at, Florida's Natural Orange Juice have, I guess, little to no concept of packaging and its importance. They keep doing this. They keep, the different styles of juice with the amounts of pulp in it used to be very much more clearly delineated by color on the packaging, and they eliminated most of that. It's still there, but it's in this tiny little box, the color of which is either this or that or the other for the various gradients of pulp, and they're all, of course, stored right next to each other and occasionally get mixed up in the shelves because people move them around. And as a result, our emergency backup box of orange juice had the wrong amount of pulp in it and had to be treated post-production. That's how I spent the morning, not fixing the laptop, but straining the pulp out of orange juice. It's tough out there, but you make do the best you can, I suppose. It got in the way of my very highly successful, highly productive morning routine that I was trying to start. Today would have been the first day of my adopting this brand new productivity routine that I learned about last night on Twitter. It would be a lot easier to tell you about it, of course, if the laptop were up and running and I had that to use to scroll back in Twitter to my feed yesterday. I just happened to see this. This is the sort of thing that you get at random on Twitter, which is kind of one of those fun things. But where is it? Here we are. Productivity expert Tim Ferriss, Ferriss. He's an expert because, I don't know, it says he is. Business Insider, more specifically, says he is. He's a productivity expert, and he starts every day with this fantastic routine, which I guess we should all start with because it worked for this guy, including giving him a bald head and a goatee. And you know how that correlates with productivity and guru status. Tim Ferriss, for the first time, thank God, revealing his morning routine. And I just found it very interesting and entertaining. And the key, I think, to his success and productivity is that as soon as he wakes up, he engages in transcendental meditation. Now, it doesn't have to be TM, as he calls it. It can be headspace, in case you differentiate between your meditation styles. But either one of the high-dollar meditation classes will do, I'm sure. He bills himself, like I said, as a productivity expert, but Business Insider bills him that way. When he identifies himself in the video, he says he's an angel investor, which means he's a rich person who occasionally invests money in startups in exchange for being able to drain all the cash out of them later as an angel. I think angel investors are venture capitalists who tell you you're really good at what you're doing while they drain all the money out of there. Or they invest in businesses that probably nobody else thinks will work, and then they take all the money out of it. That's, I think, what the angel part of it is. Oh, you would help us, not be able to eventually make a go of this business? Thanks, angel. Anyway, he wakes up in the morning, and the first thing he does is not get started producing anything, but meditates to clear his head. Now, I am told by at least two people who I guess know something about transcendental meditation that actually meditating after you wake up is actually that's a good time to meditate. I don't know how it is for productivity, but we might measure things differently. But it's a really good time to meditate. And somebody else made the, I think, rather astute observation is that, that's just the Eastern philosophy way of hitting the snooze bar, I guess, is you just don't get out of bed and you meditate, or maybe you sit up in bed and you say, I don't really know that much about transcendental meditation. But didn't seem like a really great productivity measure to me, but it works for him, and he's an angel, so it's got to work. So he gets up in the morning and meditates to clear his head from having cleared his head from having been asleep. But he points out that he does it for about 20 minutes, and then there's an additional 2 minutes afterwards during which he lets his mind wander and do what it wants to do. Mine wants to go back to sleep, but his wants to, I don't know what. But I always thought, maybe I misunderstand the things, but I always thought of meditation time as that's the time to clear your head. But he needs a 2 minutes additional, another 10%, to clear his head from having cleared his head for 20 minutes, from having woken up from being asleep for however many hours. And then he's ready to go, I guess, except that what getting ready to go means for this guy is he needs to do his journaling, which I skip entirely. But so he wakes up in the morning, he meditates for 20 minutes, then he lets his mind clear from the meditation for 2 minutes. Then he does his journaling, which I guess is also supposed to help clear your head from the clearing your head from the meditating after having just woken up. And I always learned, like in psychology, sleep and REM sleep and dreaming, that was for clearing your head. But, there's different approaches to these things. Once he's done with the journaling, he's surely ready to go, except, though, he has to pause for what he calls 5-minute journaling, which is journaling in bullet points, which is really like clearing his head from the journaling, which, of course, clears his head from the head clearing that goes on after the meditation after he wakes up. Then, at that point, it's time to brew tea. So, that also helps clear your head. And he shares with us his favorite blends of tea, after which it is time for a small amount to eat. And then on to the, how much does one of these things cost? Peloton bicycle, or the, I forget what he calls it, but there is apparently a very expensive rowing machine that he has. That is an alternative. So, wake up, meditate, clear your head from the meditation, journal, 5-minute head clearing journal to get rid of the journaling, tea, a little to eat, then hit the Peloton for an hour or so, then the shower, then the phone call, I guess, to the boss saying, I'm not coming in today.
But it's a really good time.
So, okay. Well, here we can even hear it again. This is a little bit like journaling a second time, I think. All right, Greg, are you done with your third or fourth meditation now? Should I let you go?
Sort of. You
Yeah.
know, it's what I like to do, actually,
Yeah.
is just daydream all day, and then, maybe it's just ADHD, but
That
not
could
TM.
be.
I don't know.
It
But
could be the
daydreaming is a
same.
good thing.
I think so. It seems to work for him. He's an angel investor and can't afford a collar. It doesn't look like on his shirt, but he's probably doing that on purpose. I just thought that was fantastic, and lots of great responses, of course, from the working moms who want helpful tips on how can I be as productive as you when I have to make lunches, change diapers,
Well,
or whatever. Is there any way
Yeah,
for me to do
sleep
this?
4 hours a day, don't have kids, and hire
Yeah.
everybody to do all the stuff that you don't have time to do.
Be a
That's how you get to
billionaire.
be productive.
Call yourself an angel. I did like
saw
his
something,
tea.
I saw something similar on
Yes.
Twitter yesterday that
Oh.
I captured and sent to a lot of my friends who thought it resonated with
Yeah.
them. It was from Adam J.K., and it says, "Do what you love and you'll," and then the never work a day in your life part is scratched out.
Yeah.
And what's added, it says, "Do what you love and you'll work super freaking hard all the time with no separation or any boundaries, and also take everything extremely personally."
Yes.
And I thought this
That may be true.
resonated with me.
Yeah.
You know,
A lot
it
of
fits
people
in with my
probably feel that way.
Asperger's when I don't want to see other people.
Yeah. Well, everyone
And
has
that's
a
how you
different
be
approach.
productive, you know? You
Yes.
go around and you throw yourself into your work and then notice it's 9 o'clock and you haven't gotten anything done yet, and then you get mad at people.
Right.
You
So
know, it works for me.
you need to add tea
That's
to
9
that.
p.m., by the way.
But okay. And then you'll be on track. His secret blend, by the way, in case you're thinking it's all in the tea, oolong. That's like Lipton, I think. So,
Formosa
just-
oolong was
but
one
for
of my
him,
favorite
it's-
teas growing up. It's a black tea. It's very good.
Yeah. Well, it
Nice,
seems to
fresh.
clear his head after 2 meditations, sleep, 2 meditations, 2 journalings, then comes the tea.
Yeah, and then you take a nap.
Right.
You know? It's getting better. I'm liking it better and better as I hear about it.
It's pretty good. And top it all off with an hour on the Peloton. You got to have a penthouse window to do your Peloton in, of course.
I suppose. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to talk a little bit about process, but not in the usual way.
All right.
That is to say, normally. So let me make this clear to our listeners. Normally, when I talk about process, I quiz David because he's a process expert. This is going to be critical of process, but not David, because David sees big picture. Republicans apparently don't. And so what's happening these days is that Republicans have decided to feed to the media the following proposition,
Yes.
that Democrats are overreaching.
There goes our computer again. Sorry.
Yay, because the
We'll see.
process is
Yeah.
that there's so many different investigations that it must be overreach.
Right. It has to be because
It has to be, right?
regular reach is only
and
about
so
yo
this
long.
whole concept was like taking hold on cable throughout most of the morning, except then the Q poll came out and sort of destroyed it. So let's talk about the process in terms of what they were thinking.
All right.
Okay. So, and I heard it again this morning on Morning Joe from Rick Tyler, who's otherwise a somewhat sensible conservative commentator.
Maybe.
Commentator, communist, they're all the same. You know,
right.
the whole idea is that you get totally subsumed by the process. It assumes that, number one, the Democrats don't know what they're doing. Number two, that they have no reason to be looking at stuff. Number three, if it's too complicated, you shouldn't do it. And it also applies to the Mueller situation as well. That's why when we talked about the fact that Rudy Giuliani's RICO experience was so relevant, you can roll it all up in a simple frame. This is a crime family and they're guilty of racketeering. That's not difficult. You can even put that on a bumper sticker. That is not that difficult. But the idea is somehow or other, the Democrats can't possibly look at different things at the same time and come out with anything that the public can understand. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that Adam Schiff, for example, in the Intelligence Committee, hired a former prosecutor, Daniel Goldman, who was Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Southern District in New York, the Sovereign District, from 2007 to 2017. And this is going to be an aggressive investigation, as the New Yorker puts it. Jeffrey Toobin wrote about this, of the Trump campaign's ties to Russia during the 2016 presidential campaign. They have somebody, in other words, who can handle the complexity. That's not that difficult. And then the whole concept is that if you were just looking, if you really had nothing there, and this is the part that gets me the most annoyed, if you were simply going through the motion of having these hearings, if this were Benghazi, where there was nothing underlying it, but you simply had the hearings and the investigation for the sake of having them in order to detract and distract and otherwise push off track,
Right.
If that's where it was, that's one thing. But the fact is there is so much there that we already know about. And the idea that these proper oversight hearings somehow won't uncover things that are bad is just a ridiculous concept.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of, they shouldn't do it for the two parallel reasons of the public won't get it, and at the same time, it's just a waste of time, just like Benghazi, is just really infuriating because neither of those things are true. The whole idea that there's nothing there is belied by the huge number of indictments that have already happened, all of the stories that have come out, the fact that it's not just the congressional Democrats that are doing this. The New York State folks are now looking at Trump insurance issues for his organization and how he valued properties and so on and so forth. I mean, it is a crime family, and this stuff is going to be uncovered. And so the idea that this is somehow a Benghazi without using that name parallel is just absurd. That's on the face of the substance behind some of these investigations. As far as the public goes, this really was a stunner poll from Quinnipiac. The headline, 64% of U.S. voters say Trump committed a crime.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
They're right.
Now, did he not commit crime before he was president, or did he?
Sure.
President Trump committed crimes before he was president, and they're pretty sure that that's the case. Now, Republicans aren't convinced, but everyone else is. That gets back to my ongoing, it doesn't matter what Republicans think. It matters what the entire population thinks. Mm-hmm. Now, U.S. voters are divided 45 to 43 on whether Trump committed any crimes while he's president. Okay. A presidential campaign or a candidate paying money to hide a negative story during a campaign and not disclosing that payment is unethical and a crime, 40% of voters say. Another 21% say it's unethical but not a crime, and 20% say it's not unethical at all. It's what we do, right? That's his base. I mean, really, when you're looking at these 25% numbers, that's the core base that's never going to vary from Trump. The rest are in play. Congress should not begin impeachment proceedings against Trump. American voters say 59 to 35. But Congress should do more to investigate Michael Cohen's claims about President Trump's unethical and illegal behavior. 58 to 35.
Sure.
So the public wants Democrats to investigate. They want Congress to investigate, and Democrats are the only one that's going to do it.
Okay.
And what this is telling us is that there is fertile ground for whatever comes out of the Mueller investigation and all these other investigations for those seats to land. People are saying, I don't really understand it. It is complicated, but I do know this. It feels to me like Trump is committing crimes or has committed crimes for sure before he was president, and we want you to look. I don't know that we want to start impeachment proceedings yet because we don't know what you're going to find. But if you find stuff, that's a different story. So asking about beginning impeachment proceedings now is very different than should you investigate. Of course you should investigate. In fact, that's Nancy Pelosi's line. Don't start impeachment proceedings now. Do the investigation. Go where the data leads you. If that leads you to impeachment later, fine. That's not the point. The point is to go find out exactly what happened. And the American public is fine with that approach.
That's good. That's level-headed.
It is. Now, it turns out American voters believe Cohen more than Trump, 50 to 35.
But
so when these process folks step back and say it's too complicated a process, and why are you doing this? And Democrats are overreaching. That's not what the voters are saying at all. The voters are saying, look, we already believe a known liar and convicted fabricator who's going to jail. We actually believe him more than the president of the United States by 15 points.
Oh, well, that's a pretty good amount of points for a convicted guy.
See, I'm yelling like a Republican at committee.
All right.
So they go and they yell at Cohen, "You're a liar! You're a liar! You're just a pathological liar!" And Cohen says to them, "Are you talking about me or the president?" And people saw that, and they believe him and not the president.
Yeah.
So when Mueller comes out with stuff, the idea that, oh, well, it really won't make an impact because Trump has done everything to diffuse all this stuff, that's BS. That is not how the public is reacting to this.
Okay. Well, it's encouraging.
Even a third of Republicans think that Trump committed crimes before he was president. 1/3. Now, you're not going to get every Republican. You're not going to get unanimity on this. But remember, in American politics, 57-43 is a landslide election.
That is true. We do forget that from time to time. It seems like it's close when it's a question like, well, did he commit crimes? Well, only 57%, because it should be more closer to 90, don't you think? But, well, if you were to cast your votes based on that, and assuming that you would vote against a liar, I'm not certain that's the case, yeah, I guess that would be a landslide, wouldn't it? Okay.
So Tim Malloy, who's the assistant director of the Quinnipiac poll, put it this way. When 2/3 of voters think you've committed a crime in your past life and almost half of voters say it's a toss-up of whether you committed a crime while in the office now, confidence in your overall integrity is pretty shaky. Add to that, Michael Cohen, a known liar headed to the big house, has more credibility than the leader of the free world.
Yeah. That's okay. Well, maybe
His job approval is at 38. So another infuriating thing is that people will take the NBC Wall Street Journal poll of 46 and the Rasmussen poll of 48 and say, oh, look, it doesn't matter because Trump's job approval is 46-48. Well, no.
It's
First of all, you can ignore Rasmussen because they don't know what they're doing in terms of polling. Right. They're the ones that often have them above 50. In this case, it's below 50. That in and of itself is significant. And in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, for example, where he polled 46, that's just his range bouncing back and forth. That doesn't translate, so I want to vote for him a second time for president. In fact, that's not the case. That particular poll said people don't want to vote for him for president, and they'd rather vote for a Democrat. That was 48-41. So the point here is the American public is primed, despite all of the Fox News propaganda outlets, Sinclair, all the stuff that Rudy Giuliani, you name it, all of the different smoke and mirrors machines that they've been doing, the public is still primed to hear bad news, if in fact it's bad news for the president, from these investigations, and they want the investigations. That's
all
what
right.
this is telling us.
Well, I know where to get some of those investigations.
Yeah, I got your investigations right here.
Well, that is one place. All right. Well, they do continue forward, and of course, I guess the poll was taken right after, probably just started right after hearing from Michael Cohen, but it's a relatively new revelation to most people, even who are half watching anyway, that Trump is now accused of committing crimes while in office. That the
March
hush
1
money
to March
payments
4th is when the poll was. So.
Okay, so it did come after, but I think it's sort of just sinking in now that people are just beginning to realize the date on those hush money checks are from well after his inauguration. In addition, of course, I guess people still slowly waking up to the emoluments problem, but. Yeah, and this is the first time I've seen. This is just one of those things. Even though you and I and people following the show, people following Trump's crimes closely, know when they took place. In the main, it's not discussed, and the poll reflects it among people who say, yeah, sure, he's committed some crimes, but they're old ones from way in the past, and so. These investigations will turn up all sorts of fun new things, and I guess that number will change. And as the numbers change and the number of people who believe he did things that were illegal while he was president, I assume that gets reflected in job approval and reelect numbers too. But Who knows?
Yeah, eventually. So they specifically asked some questions about North Korea as well. Voters say 52-42, they do not have confidence in Trump to handle the situation with North Korea.
Yes, new info there, too.
Is a good idea to try to get closer to Kim Jong-un? People say sure. And they're divided over whether the president's meetings with Kim Jong-un have been a success or failure. Well, look, if you put it, would you rather get closer to Kim Jong-un or would you rather have a nuclear holocaust on the Korean Peninsula or maybe a firestorm with Seoul? Okay, I think maybe getting closer to Kim Jong-un is a good idea.
Yeah, I guess given those two choices, it's sort of interesting. And
that's not how the poll question was asked, but
no,
I think that's how people think about it.
Probably true.
Right. They don't trust Trump to do anything on foreign policy, though. Trump gets 39.58 on leadership, 39.58 about average Americans, 22.71 that he's a good role model for children. I wouldn't let my children, especially my girl children, anywhere near him. And even on the economy, only gets 49.45 approval. Negative 38.56 on foreign policy, negative 40-58 for immigration. So his signature issue, he's not doing well with the public. And this was interesting. Voters say 65-30. Trump is not honest, and that's his worst grade ever on that character trait.
That's surprising. I feel like he could have.
So people are catching on. It takes a long time sometimes.
Yeah, the everything does. Surprisingly, amazingly enough. Okay, well, as long as people are catching on, and I guess if the alternative is blowing up the world, I suppose I would stand a little closer to Kim Jong-un. I can understand those answers.
Trade deficit is 10-year high.
Oh, yes. Oh, that too. Well, when we come back, we'll hit it all again. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Catching up on a little bit of chatter and pop culture news during the break as well.
Yeah, Gayle King and R. Kelly. R. Kelly was on CBS this morning, and Gayle King interviewed him. And R. Kelly had a Brett Kavanaugh moment and just stood up and started screaming at her in terms of, why are you attacking me? Why are you killing my career? And she kept her calm. It was a masterful class on how to interview somebody. But it's I'm sure on Twitter and other places, YouTube, well worth looking at just for a few minutes to see what's going on. Otherwise, that's about as much as I'm going to handle with that one.
I can add nothing to that except it is interesting that this is is this a new PR direction? Like, are people coaching their clients?
You wonder.
If it's sexual harassment or misconduct.
It worked for Judge Brett. Why not Justice Brett? Why not for me?
Why not Justice R. Kelly next? He can get onto the Supreme Court. And so did he literally throw chairs?
No, but he stood up and started screaming. He stood up and started screaming.
As you know,
he was sitting in a chair, and they were sitting in chairs opposite each other.
Well, that happens.
And you can see the set frame, so it looks like it's just the two chairs. And then he stood up and started walking around, so the camera had to pull back, and then you can see the bare bones around the chairs and the wires.
That's always interesting.
That sort of stuff. Yeah, so it was really pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I like breaking down the illusion a little bit and showing the reality of the warehouses they do these things in.
And whereas you can, whether it's acting or not, focusing on R. Kelly's, emotional Rolfing there, you can at the same time look at Gayle King as an interviewer and just see how good she is.
I I guess. All right. Well, I'd then encourage people to go ahead and do that. You have to be careful when you're accusing people of throwing chairs. As you know, that's now a loaded term, and you have to prove that chairs actually flew.
Yeah. Well, you have the video
last
there. He
election.
didn't throw chairs. He
Okay.
was very angry and
Proof.
looked like he was about to.
All right. But he didn't. It's important. He was very restrained.
He didn't,
All right. Weird.
throw anything. He
To
didn't
say
throw
the
anything.
least. Okay.
He just got angry. So, we were talking about statistics. A 10-year trade deficit, 10-year high. And, of course, it's worst with China. And this is all because Trump's policies, including his tariffs, aren't working. Something else that isn't working is it's bad enough that President Baby Jail, has done horrible things to families and children on the border with Mexico. But the whole idea of getting tough would be to discourage people from coming.
That was the idea.
Apprehensions of undocumented families in Texas at the U.S.-Mexico border are surging, and they've tripled from the same period last year.
Oh.
So they're neither humane nor are they working. So why are they doing it? And, I think that Kirstjen Nielsen is coming to one of the committees to talk about her successes over the past, few months.
Well, I'm concerned that this means that they'll just get worse. I mean, on the one hand, what he's doing isn't working because they were very clear in private that their idea was the crueler they are, the more they would discourage immigration, which is that's terrible and the wrong thing to do. But then it didn't work. But then they kept saying that they were in crisis at the border. But I kept hearing people say that the numbers were at all-time lows and that there wasn't
relatively
a crisis
speaking to other years. That's true.
Okay,
but there's been a surge compared to last year.
I see.
So that's number one. Number two is they're Republicans.
Okay.
So let's frame this in a way that we're all familiar with. Taxes.
Are they
right?
familiar with taxes?
The economy is good. Now's the time to lower taxes. Or the economy is bad. That means we have to lower taxes.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
Right.
So whatever happens at the border is proof that we need a wall.
Well, that's
if it's slowed down,
sounds
it's
like
because
them.
we need a wall, and the walls there are preventing people from coming in. And if it's ramping up, we need a wall because how else are you going to keep them out unless you have a wall?
Yeah. Well, that seems
Because every
plain.
possible iteration of what's happening just proves you need a wall. Of course, he's not getting that wall.
Well, but the proof is there that he needs it. That's the good news. All right. Well, I guess they do that with everything, I suppose. Whatever they want, and that's gimmitarianism for you, and it doesn't matter whether it makes any sense. You also mentioned the trade.
Oh, by the way, Democrats are
deficits.
socialists. Did you know that?
I
know
sure.
that because
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan told me that about socialized medicine.
Right. And if
It's
they're
a
not,
famous
that doesn't matter.
record, like album, this vinyl thing of Ronald Reagan talking about how Medicare is socialized medicine.
Yes. He later on loved it a great deal, but that's okay.
As he got older.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
So coincidentally. Yeah, there's that's the hot thing, of course, is to accuse every Democrat of being socialist. But of course, no one knows what it means. And
Look,
some
Democrats
people
are
who do.
socialists, and we need to build a wall, and we have to have lower taxes. And they say we're not the party of ideas.
Right. We're also, by the way, one of the new favorites. We're murdering every baby.
Infanticide.
Yes, there's no people being born in the world now because Democrats keep killing them all.
Right. Yeah.
This is
So
all
that's
true.
a complete and total lie. And, it's just, it is. And, the whole infanticide charge is a total lie.
Yes.
And Jen Gunther had a wonderful op-ed about the reality and sadness of having a non-viable baby born and what you do with it. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over that, but suffice to say, read her piece and what Republicans are accusing Democrats of, complete and total lie.
Yeah, doesn't matter for them. They just
So I wanted to focus a little bit more on
say
Texas
this.
because
Oh,
Texas
okay.
had that whole border thing there. And there's a bunch of polling out from the University of Texas and the Texas Tribune. John Cornyn
They better go
is not
catch it.
doing well. He's less popular. He's +1 favorable compared to Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, not a popular
What if
guy.
what if you're less likable than Ted Cruz?
I don't know. What do you do? Is this
That's bad.
Oh, well, yeah, it is.
Does that make you the new Zodiac killer? I don't know.
Yes, let's say it does.
Donald Trump is not that strong in Texas. He's basically tied with a generic Democrat.
Oh, okay.
Nancy Pelosi says Texas is ground zero in 2020. She told the Travis County Democratic Party's annual dinner on Monday night, ground zero for us. And then look at the results at the Beto O'Rourke when Beto ran for Senate there. Okay. So Texas is actually becoming a little bit more purplish than it was. Well,
that's good news, certainly, as compared to the bad news of my other computer now beginning to crash, which is troubling.
Is it?
But...
Well, is that the one that's driving this conversation?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if we cut out, it's David Swalps.
Yes, the other alternative, or the more likely alternative, is that we will not cut out at all, and the no music will come up for the break, and we'll just awkwardly continue.
It's the fault of the orange juice.
Yes, I think so. I must have spilled it on the computer. This is unusual because this is the brand new, really good, super powerful one. Apparently confused by my having opened another tab. So,
oh dear.
Yeah.
So
we're okay for
there's
now.
a lot else going on as well. We have a whole bunch of stuff in the pundit roundup from today. Remember, we're talking about the ridiculousness of complaining about this, but here's a summary of what the House probes are looking for documents on: hush money payments, Trump-Putin talks, firing Comey, business dealings with Russia, the Moscow Project, WikiLeaks. That's from Tim Hanrahan, who is a DC News Desk chief at the Wall Street Journal. And those are all important and substantive things that are well worth looking at. And there's reasons why that needs to be looked at. In other words, each one of those things is justified by Trump's actions. So if your complaint is that there's too many investigations, the answer is, well, Trump has done too many things. That's not the investigator's fault. No. That's Trump's fault.
I would agree.
So one of the other things that's not even on there is Jared Kushner and his security clearance. So Elijah Cummings over at Oversight says, well, give us documents to show how he got his security clearance. And the White House refused. And Jill Wine-Banks, who was one of the Watergate prosecutors, says, White House refused the request, this is on Twitter, for documents regarding the Kushner security clearance, so subpoena may be next.
Yes.
If 45 stonewalls, and remember, stonewall is a Nixon verb.
All right.
Nixon told his staff to stonewall. If 45 stonewalls like Nixon are Watergate subpoena and SCOTUS opinion answers what would happen, it may be time for Congress to go to court for those docs. She's essentially saying that the Democrats will win this because they did during the Watergate era, and there's a precedent. There's a precedent for the president.
Yeah. If you can get to court. I mean, that's a problem. And it worries me.
I'm not worried about winning. I'm worried about how long it will take.
Well, that too. But I'm worried about, I'm not certain what people are considering. I am continually shocked to find out that acknowledged experts in the field find themselves shocked when they find out how contempt of Congress is prosecuted or not prosecuted, and that they've been plotting these things and writing op-ed articles that say, well, this is how you do it, and we're going to win because in court there's precedent, and then you tell them, but if no one prosecutes the case, you don't get to court. And they say, well, what do you mean that doesn't prosecute the case? Well, here's how it works. What? Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh, my God. Like, why would it? Why? Now we have to spend time undoing your op-ed because everybody's come to rely on it. I'm not certain whether they sometimes they know and they're just saying, well, I'm focusing on one thing at a time. But I don't know. I last time around with this, in the last Democratic majority in the House, we were shocked to learn that Henry Waxman, then chair of the Oversight Committee, had no idea that there was such a problem or that there was a solution in the form of inherent contempt. He had never heard of it. Like, okay.
Well, the Watergate veterans, I think, will help here. So, they've been through that they've been down that road before. I'm going to just wind up then and say there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on there, but it really all comes together in the sense of Trump being in pretty big trouble here. He's getting investigated in all sorts of different ways by all sorts of different units.
Yes.
New York State interviewing him or asking for subpoenas about his business, for example, that's pardon proof. For the Democrats to do it in Congress, that's different than what Mueller's doing. And the Mueller report is getting a tremendous amount of pressure because of the Democrats' own requests about investigating Trump. The Mueller report is going to be really, 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 really difficult to bottle up. The public wants to know. They want investigations. And so Bill Barr may want to try to, stifle this as much as possible. The political pressure to do that or to not do that, against doing that, is going to be enormous. So I'll leave you with that.
Okay.
And I'm also going to leave you with this one piece here. It's from The Independent, and it's written by Molly Jong-Fast, and it's a summary of her 3 days at the craziness known as CPAC. Actually, the headline is, I spent 3 days listening to a smoldering ash heap of Trumpian shills at CPAC, and you can read about it here.
Okay.
I lost 3.5 days of my life at CPAC, so you don't have to.
Fair enough. All right, we'll have to take a look at that one as we reboot for the 56th time. And, all right, let me see if we can arrange for some way of limping through the rest of the program, because this is really difficult.
Well, I did what I could, but
yes, I
I have to
appreciate
go, and I will be back tomorrow. And hopefully, you remember, if all else fails, zap your pram and put a quarter in the back
I'm
of the
zapping
machine
everything I can think of.
And see what happens.
Okay.
Take care, and I'll talk to you then.
All right, very good. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Let's see if your departure does anything to wake up the computer. It did hang up Skype, but it didn't give me the aperture. So this is really interesting. So now the backup laptop is simply crashing over and over again. The main computer that runs the show, and for all I know, we're off the air and nobody's able to tell me because everything else is frozen. The main computer that runs the show appears to still be running the show, but appears unwilling to acknowledge any clicks of my mouse. So I am stuck on a screen from the web client of Twitter, and I can't get to any of the other controls. The control panel on the bottom of the screen comes up just fine, but I can't click to any other tabs, which means I can't activate soundboard, which means I won't be able to play the music when the break comes, assuming we're still on the air. That is actually happening. And so we'll have to exit out into the break in most awkward fashion, during which time I will try to reboot the system, although the break is only a 1 minute break. And so there will be some awkwardness coming back from the break. And, of course, we may never come back from the break, period. And so this is making it really tough. It's also very difficult. Oh, thank you, Scott. Scott lets us know that we sound fine. This is the most puzzling crash I've had. So it's difficult to know what to do. But one of the main difficulties in continuing with the show, despite the awkwardness, is I can't get to Pocket. I can't scroll to look at Greg's other stories. I can't view Twitter. I have literally zero input with respect to prompting material or materials to read. My best option at this point is to simply scroll backwards on my own Twitter feed on my phone, which still works, and see if I can remind myself of stories that I may have found interesting enough to put in Pocket, but will never know because I can't get to Pocket. What a challenge. Okay. Let's see. Let's scroll backwards and see what has interested me in the last couple days. Well, there was this, something I labeled on Twitter as an extremely important point, and it was one, and I thought I might perhaps share this, I don't know whether I really need to share the thread of tweets or not, but they certainly make an excellent point. It comes from a tweeter under the handle of Lincoln's Bible, someone with whom I am not necessarily familiar, but who has a tremendous number of followers. So that must be nice. And I'm not sure through what channel this came to my attention, but they do make this very excellent point that now with all of the investigations going on into Trump world, the term money laundering is much top of mind for a lot of people, and it's coming up again and again. And let's see, Lincoln's Bible tweeted about it, linking to his or her own earlier tweet storm, which makes this important point. But let's start with the renewed point in which he or she says, it's time to re-up all conversations on money laundering, not just the mechanics of it, but the nature of the money being laundered. Where did it come from and how is it made? And she launches into this discussion of money laundering and what it really is, which I thought was an extremely important point. Let me go through the tweet thread, and then we'll reiterate the point then at the end. Lots of money laundering mentions in the mainstream media, finally, for which he or she is very thankful. But just to say the words money laundering, make it sound so, as they put it here in quotes, rich people crime, instead of, capital letters, organized crime, which to me doesn't even quite state the point as bluntly as it has to. But first, some justification. The tweet continues, so here are the main profit centers for blood money washed clean through high-end real estate. And remember, that's where Trump does his money laundering. Okay. And so there's a chart here that basically notes some of the major places from which the amounts of money typically laundered through things like high-end real estate come from. There would be financial fraud, there would be blood diamonds, drugs, arms trade, nuclear materials, an illicit trade in nuclear materials, and you know where that ends up. Natural resources, oil, whether black market oil or whatever, and of course sex trafficking, also much in the news. But Lincoln's Bible's thread here continues. Did you lose a loved one to heroin that followed an opioid addiction? Well, someone profited off that death, and of course a widespread problem, right? And they have to wash that money clean before they can use it. Did you get scammed in a financial fraud? How about the fear that you have from every terrorist attack? Or maybe you were in one or lost a loved one that way, or waved goodbye to a loved one who went to serve in a destabilized region. Someone sold arms to those regimes and bandits. Someone profited off that carnage, and they have to wash that money clean. Nuclear proliferation is a real thing. Someone sells nuclear material to terrorist regimes. It's a lot of money, billions in profits, and they have to wash that money clean. Should you believe the Republicans, the GOP, right now, as they disparage countries for their corrupt regimes? Well, no. Don't listen to their conclusions on immigration, no, but do learn how some nations' regimes have ravaged their people by stealing natural resources and using enforced labor to do so. Oh, and then arming children to inflict violence to destabilize further so that they can keep stealing and stealing and stealing. Yeah, that blood money has to be washed clean too. And then there's this. These profits have to be washed clean too. What are we talking about here? Here's how money launderers make their money. They get a cut of the overall take. Some call it a brand licensing fee. That's familiar in Trump world. But it's actually this, pointing to horrible realities linked herein about money laundering. It's from things like the activities named. And so it's a good point that's being made here. And I think he winds up by saying, Have you got it? Because this is the cost of thinking it's just white-collar crime. I've had enough carnage. How about you? But an interesting point here. Money laundering does sound like a financial crime, which all by itself it is. But again, the most important point is money launderers, they sometimes attempt to remain ignorant of the source of the money so that they don't feel guilty about doing it. And sometimes they really are ignorant of the source of the money. But it's almost impossible to be in the business on any scale and not know that the same players keep coming to you for high-end condominiums in New York but don't live there. Something is going on. And how weird is it that Trump Tower is 65% Russian or whatever it is, or that the Trump Towers to which he licensed his name in South Florida, 7 buildings that likewise are 75% Russian. It's not that there are so many Russians all the time just hanging around in Florida. And there are a lot, but it's not that that they all need 7 apartments. It's just not really working that way. They fill them with other people because why the hell not? And they become profit centers in their own right. But if you don't think there's something weird and suspicious about it, you're just being willfully blind. But if you think about where their money comes from, and you think about where organized crime money comes from, in this country, we still find the organized crime somewhat charming because we have fun movies and television programs about it, even though they attempt in their own way to portray just how brutal it really is. Somehow it never really translates, but it's something you should absolutely think about. When they say money laundering, don't think of it as a soft crime, something that white-collar people do and doesn't really involve hurting anybody. The money they're laundering needs to be laundered because it's blood money. It's murder money. That's how you should think of it. And in case you need any help with it, Paul Manafort's own daughters hit the nail on the head. Remember what we learned from their somehow captured and revealed text conversation, in addition to the extremely alarming information about the nature, as they view it, of the Manafort marriage, which was shocking and made your skin crawl if you really dug into what was being said as between the two daughters here. But the daughters are clear with one another. Dad's money is blood money. We think he gets it in this clean-ish way, like, oh, I'm just consulting with politicians. Political consulting is like a legitimate business. But if the politicians you're consulting for are, in fact, mob operatives, well, they're oligarchs. But okay, but really think about what they really are here. They're mobsters. It's a mafia state, as I think Sarah Kendzior likes to put it when she discusses these things. If you are consulting with mafia state operatives who, are stealing on the level of just draining national coffers like this and then laundering their money elsewhere, I mean, how do you get in a position to simply take over a country and drain all of its natural resources and keep the money for yourself and not be called out on it? And the answer is you have to kill and threaten to kill lots of people such that the authorities and the real authorities, the police, the investigative people, the people who are for good government in their country are afraid to end your dominance because they are literally afraid they and their families will all be murdered. The money that's then stolen by appropriating the natural resources of the country and funneling the profits from that theft to yourself is protected by murder. That money makes it blood money. And that money, if you, even if all you're doing is, well, all I do is I sell high-end luxury real estate to people who have cash. It's not my place to ask questions. It is, of course, actually a matter of law enforcement interest in this country. You're supposed to know about this, and that's what makes it a crime. Willful blindness to laundering blood money doesn't actually help you with the jury, or it's not supposed to help you with a jury. Maybe you can convince a jury to be sympathetic to you because, after all, I'm just a real estate agent. I just make apartments, beautiful, terrific, world-class, beautiful condominiums and apartments, and I sell them to whoever's got money. I don't ask where the money comes from. That's not part of my business. It just so happens that they all say they're legitimate businessmen in Ukraine and Russia or wherever, and they just happen to own the franchise on, I don't know, aluminum or oil in an entire region or several countries at once. And it's weird. They're sometimes the president of that country, and then oddly, they and their entire family need 15, 17, 18, 25 luxury apartments in New York. Aren't you busy as the president of your own country? No, apparently not. We're all going to live here instead. And so, okay, sure, whatever. All right, well, here comes our first test. It's the break coming up. I don't have the music and no ability to get to it without shutting down. Now, the question is, should I simply do without the music and not run the risk of shutting down and not being able to restart, or are the odds better that I'll be able to restart and have the music? We will find out. I don't know. We'll see what we go with here. I think I'm going to give it a shot and restart the computer, just because also there's the possibility that I won't be able to bring Joan on, and that'll be disastrous. So in about 15 seconds here, Netroots radio stream will cut out. Everything will sound like it normally sounds, even though the break will be abrupt. And then hold your breath. It's like re-entry. We'll see on the other side whether we're alive. All right, how about this? That should be a rather abrupt re-entry. Let's see if things are working. Are we alive? Did we make it through re-entry? Did we burn up in the atmosphere? Not really sure. Well, we'll wait for a thumbs up from somebody, and we'll see whether we can get all the rest of our gear working. Looks like the programs work, and luckily Soundboard is even up on the first try. So, maybe we make it, maybe we don't. Let's see. We've got, Scott tells us we'll be back message is on the Netroots stream. Some music. We'll see. I'm not really sure what Justice's computer is going to make of all this. But at the very least, we'll be able to put together a second hour, give or take a few minutes, of the podcast. And see how it goes from there. Okay, well, let's open up a couple more tabs here. We are back. Okay, thanks, Scott. Well, that's what it takes, I guess, in order to make things work on an emergency basis. All right, well, that gives us a chance to open up Pocket 2, which is good news because we'll be able to read a couple of the other important stories and keep you occupied now from here on in. All right, let's turn our attention from Lincoln's Bible's very important point about how you should be thinking about money laundering and what it is every time you hear about it, to one or two other important points. First one here that I wanted to share with you, something raised both by Michael Musson and Matthew Rigdon, both of whom tweeted information about this, but an excellent point that I'd like to read some more about. But Michael noted at first the OLC memo that we frequently refer to as, and that other the mainstream media folks refer to all the time as being the source of the belief held by, among others, Robert Mueller, that a sitting president cannot be indicted, is of interesting provenance and of questionable value. We've questioned the value of it just based on the circumstances which we currently face, and of course the fact that it's simply an OLC opinion, which does carry some weight, but isn't definitive. Now, Michael Musson's observation on it from 2 days ago, Monday, I suppose, is that the OLC memo written, that is against indicting the president, weighing in against the allowability of indicting a sitting president, was written in order to say that you could indict the VP so that justice could go after Spiro Agnew. It wasn't supposed to be a permanent policy, for one thing, and that Rachel Maddow covered this rather extensively, I gather, because that's the way she covers most such things. A little more clarity added to the picture from Matthew Rigdon, who tells us that thanks to the Bagman podcast, Bagman, not Bag Lady, Bagman. A Bag Lady is, this is interesting sexism for you. A Bag Lady is a crazy weirdo who poses no serious threat to you whatsoever, whereas a Bagman is a tough mobster who will kick your ass and possibly murder you. Interesting, isn't it? There's different kinds of bags, and maybe it's that and not the sexism, but I suspect sexism in everything. Anyway, thanks to the Bagman podcast. That was the real point. I learned, Matthew says, the DOJ used to insist that a vice president couldn't be indicted either. A sitting vice president, presumably, until, or rather, I guess maybe we'll emphasize it this way, until they needed to push Spiro Agnew out before Nixon in order to avoid a Speaker of the House becoming president, and I assume that basically they probably were looking to avoid, 1, the weirdness, 2, the destabilization, 3, very possibly they viewed it as further destabilizing by switching parties. The Speaker of the House would at that point have been a Democrat. So in order to avoid that situation, they needed a new view of things. It used to be the position of the Department of Justice that neither of the two executive figures, elected figures, the president and vice president, could be indicted while in office. I guess. I mean, I'm taking their word for it. So I assume that that meant that their view of things was that they were both too busy running the country, although it's very difficult to believe that anybody thought that the vice president was too busy actively running the country at any given time. But anyway, you could see some logic in trying to treat the two elected executive figures similarly. But when a situation arose that could require both the indictment of the sitting vice president and later the indictment of a sitting president, thereby perhaps leaving the running of the country to the next in line, the Speaker of the House, the Department of Justice, OLC, decided to differentiate, and I think on good grounds, between the president and the vice president. The vice president, if being indicted first, certainly, shouldn't necessarily be protected. It's not particularly disruptive to prosecute the sitting vice president. But what they needed to do was produce a new memo that says that this is the context in which this memo came to be. It was differentiating between the two of them and, I guess, attempting to deal with the political realities of the situation. It was, the country would essentially, once the facts were out, demand the indictment of Spiro Agnew. But Republicans would be leading the way in panicking about the possibility of also indicting the president. So this time, the new memo, or the memo that we're stuck with now, says, oh yeah, you can't indict a sitting president. He's different from the vice president, and he is. But that's the provenance of the memo, if that's actually it, is pretty interesting and goes to illustrate, really, in the case at least of the vice president, that when you really, really need the rules to be different in order to do something that you think is super important, it's actually not that difficult to get the job done, especially when you're relying on things like legal memoranda and legal opinions for your justification. In other words, if you can get the head of the OLC to write the memo you want, then the big restriction against indicting sitting presidents is gone. It's much the same as we discuss in the Senate all the time, or in the House of Representatives, where it's more in keeping with the general practice on rules. Yeah, if you need the rules to be different, do it. It can be done. So a very interesting thing to keep in mind. It's entirely possible that the right kind of people can be convinced to give the right kind of memo to Mueller or others, or at the very least, it's entirely believable that given a totally unique set of circumstances, Robert Mueller might, in the end, be persuaded to find the practice of believing that you cannot indict a sitting president to be less persuasive than it once was. Or, alternatively, as we've come to believe, it may be the case that the Southern District of New York, the prosecutors in that office, are the ones who come to find the reasoning less persuasive, even if you can never convince Robert Mueller of it. But a very interesting historical footnote that illustrates both that rules sometimes, who cares, right? We change them when we need to, and also that there's perhaps good reason. And some of the things that we come to think of as dead-on solid, if not legal rules, then at least norms, really aren't, and have been sold to us incorrectly. There's a number of reasons why we might come to have believed in this OLC opinion so strongly. And one of them, it's not entirely their fault necessarily. I don't want to lay it all on the feet of the media again. But one of those reasons may be that for the sake of routine reportage on these things, most reporters don't have, like what's his name? Joe Klein once said, neither the time nor the legal expertise to figure out who's right. It's just, look, I don't know what it is, but you can't indict a sitting president. And occasionally someone who looks into the situation says, well, it's been the practice of the Department of Justice since at least 1970, whatever it is. And sometimes they'll reveal to you that the provenance of the practice is this OLC memo, but they don't. Not very many people, except I guess Rachel Maddow and the Bagman podcast, and I guess now us, thanks to Michael Musson and Matthew Rigdon, and probably some number of other folks who have sent the same message and not had it picked up, just in case you're out there. Only in those situations, only in those media outlets do you ever learn the whole thing was kind of thrown together with bubblegum wrappers and, whatever else. What would be the current, there's not a lot of bubblegum wrapper construction going on these days. It seems like an archaic way of putting this. But it's a jury-rigged system, no pun intended there, that was never intended to stand for all eternity, but just began to because reporters started saying, look, the fact is you can't indict a sitting president. Or at least that's the belief under which everyone is operating. And it's a similar situation to telling everybody for years, you can't do anything in the Senate unless you have 60 votes. Or you can't change the rules in the Senate unless you have 67 votes. I mean, technically true, you can't change the rules, but you can change the way the rules are interpreted, and you can do that with far fewer votes, a majority. But it was so ingrained, believe me, I have the personal experience with that, so ingrained in everybody's consciousness that it took several years worth of education campaigns to get people in the Senate, whose institution it was, whose rules were being enforced on them, to believe that they had the power to do this. There are still people who think it was a bad idea. as the Senate apparently getting ready to exercise the power again real soon in order to rush through even more judges. I'm sure something that's on Jones' plate once again because of the number of judges being pushed through, and now the age of some of the people they're putting on there is they've just finished with, I guess, someone who's the youngest, at least the youngest woman federal judge currently sitting, a 37-year-old, woefully inadequately vetted and inadequately prepared, I think, woman now sitting in the circuit court of appeals that, or I guess who was about to anyway, who had their nomination cleared, about whom I had, I'm sure, plenty of information before, but now during our crash, our information doesn't make it all the way to pocket. But anyway, that'll be on our plate perhaps later in talking to Joan, assuming Skype is working. All right. There are many other things that I wanted to add to this, including the very important news that everything you've heard about how Donald Trump intervened in the process in order to get Jared Kushner his highly questionable security clearance is also, in case you hadn't already guessed, equally true of Ivanka Trump. So
I'm a family man.
So look at this. I'm
a techie dad. I believe the best technology should feel effortless.
Free ad for Comcast cable. Because, of course, I have to now open these things. This was the value of having the separate laptop that wasn't broadcasting, is it wasn't as loud when there was auto-playing video that opened up, and you could at least turn down the volume on the laptop so that it didn't leak through onto the microphone. No such protections now exist, as we're running it all on the one computer again. All right. Anyway, Ivanka Trump, same problem. Dad gave her a security clearance. Shouldn't have. Intervened in a way that was highly improper and unethical, if not illegal. And in most, I think, analyses, the legality doesn't really enter into it because, of course, as we've explained, the president, because we designed the laws for instances in which, one, the president has shame, two, the president cares about how he's perceived. That's somewhat different from shame. Three, the president cares about the security of the country and won't simply be handing out security clearances to anyone who asks or to all family members. Four, won't be handing out security clearances to people who have, about whom we have every right to be suspicious that they are selling national security secrets for personal profit. But all of this, we designed the national security clearance system and the classification system with all of this power inherent in the president under the assumption that people would take it seriously when they got there. And now we have a president who is simply a why don't you just ist and a gimme-tarian at that, as well as a con man and a thief. So it's very difficult. I mean, we've built the system that just sort of automatically hands this power to the president on the assumption that he deserves it and that our having elected him, even though we didn't elect him, the Electoral College did because of various foolish mistakes, and now he inherently has the power to give a security clearance to anyone he wants to. What's interesting, though, is that apparently, according to this CNN article, he does have some form of shame and conscience operating inside the head underneath that hair UFO that resides on top of it. And I guess if we get down into the details of the CNN story, we'll see it. The CNN story I'm looking at is headlined, President Pressured Staff to Grant Security Clearance to Ivanka Trump. It's basically the same headline that we saw the other day, except about Ivanka and not about Jared. It is of some additional interest because, one, it's another case, and two, it also is the perfect complement to the interview that was circulated several days ago of Ivanka Trump categorically denying, you'll remember we referenced it in the Maggie Haberman New York Times piece, categorically denying that the president had intervened in Jared's case, or in hers for that matter, and now we find out, oh, no, that's actually not the case. I guess you could still argue that she was entirely ignorant of his intervention, and it's not hard to believe that she's entirely ignorant of things in general, but there's good reason to doubt that she was ignorant of this. But anyway, the story reports Donald Trump pressured his then Chief of Staff John Kelly and White House counsel Don McGahn, same two figures, to grant his daughter and senior advisor Ivanka Trump a security clearance against their recommendations. 3 people familiar with the matter told CNN. So essentially same story as Jared Kushner. The president's crusade to grant clearances to his daughter and her husband, Jared Kushner, rankled West Wing officials. While Trump has the legal authority to grant clearances, most instances are left up to the White House Personnel Security Office, which determines whether a staffer should be granted one after the FBI has conducted a background check. But after concerns were raised by the Personnel Office, Trump pushed Kelly and McGahn to make the decision, and this is the key part here, in terms of trying to decide whether he's aware of what he's doing or not. Does he have any self-awareness? Trump pushed Kelly and McGahn to make the decision. The decision is his. At the very least, in the big exchange for giving the president this much power, even if he's a lunatic, is that the responsibility for it falls ultimately on him. But he doesn't want that. So he's pushing Kelly and McGahn to make this decision so that it did not appear as if he was tainting the process in favor of his family, sources told CNN. Of course, that's exactly what he's doing. He just didn't want it to appear that way. He wanted to be able to blame Kelly and McGahn for doing it rather than admitting that he was going to do it. Anyway, after both refused, Trump granted the security clearances anyway, so he was forced to do this. And it's interesting. I'm not certain what to make of Kelly and McGahn and this, and whether it was a principled thing, like I can't do that because it's wrong for me to do, or is it that, listen, the Personnel Security Office isn't going to accept this order from me. It has to be from you. Well, can't you just say, I told you to? Well, they're going to need something. This could be a paperwork problem. It might be that either you have to verbally tell them so that they hear you, or you need to sign some paper that I can pass on, and because they're stupid and don't listen to Kagro in the morning, they'll believe that you actually signed this thing, whether you did or didn't. It will serve the same purpose, and they'll grant the clearance. All right, well, then let's do that. And they may, I suspect at some point it's possible that Kelly and McGahn said, if you sign the paper, that's going to be archived somewhere. And when they discover that paper in the archives, then they're going to be able to hang this on you. And there's no way you're going to be able to deny knowledge of it. There's really no way you should be allowed. Constructively, you can't deny knowledge of it anyway, because this is your personal authority. But can I recommend that you do it orally so that there's no record to turn over? I'm not certain whether they were that smart or whether they thought it would be better for themselves, having now written memos to the file, that he actually does do it in, or did do it in, or however, whatever tense I need to use in that, do it on paper so that it would corroborate their memo. I don't know who they were working for and thinking on behalf of at that point. But one day, I guess we'll find out if that paper does turn out. Anyway, the latest revelation also contradicts Ivanka Trump's denial to ABC News 3 weeks ago, when she said her father had, quote, no involvement, unquote, regarding her or Kushner's clearances. And in fact, we now learn, according to these sources, the only reason they have the clearances is his involvement. Whether she knew about it, I don't know. But who cares? It's all on her dad anyway. Several sources told CNN it is feasible that she was unaware of the red flags raised during her background check process, as well as the president's involvement in it. According to a source familiar with her process, she did not seek nor have outside counsel involved in her process, as no issues were ever raised. I guess, to her knowledge. That part they don't include here. Could be that she's unaware, although I would only say this. It's very unlikely, given that the other player in this is Donald Trump. Donald Trump wouldn't miss the opportunity to make it plain to beneficiaries of his intervention that they owe him. Donald Trump's favorite pastime is claiming credit for intervention in things, and I doubt very much whether he passed on utilizing it here, though it's possible because he may already believe that these two are loyal unto death to him no matter what, and so it was unnecessary for him to impress upon them how far he had gone on their behalf. It could also be, it's entirely possible that somewhere underneath that welcome mat of hair, he was thinking, I need to protect my daughter and, by extension, her husband from this knowledge because, of course, I know it's all terribly unethical, which would only make things worse for him, but could conceivably leave Ivanka in a position to be completely ignorant of what went on. Now, they must have known, however, I mean, I guess it's possible, again, to come away thinking, no, I didn't need any special treatment. It's just weird. My husband, had to revise his security clearance forms 100 times, but, there were no issues ever raised. That's not an issue. I just forgot those things. I mean, if you really believe you just forgot them, then I guess you might also believe that it's not an issue that they kept coming back to you. Anyway, a separate person added that she was notified by career officials that her clearance had been granted. So that's also neither here nor there. I'm sure that the president himself may have said, you owe me, and then eventually comes a form letter from a career official somewhere saying, your clearance has been granted, but I won't tell you how. Kushner's clearance, of course, was downgraded in February of 2018 after Kelly stipulated new changes to the security clearance system because a senior West Wing staffer with a temporary clearance was accused of domestic abuse by his ex-wife. Aides who previously operated on top secret / sensitive compartmentalized for information interim clearances. Where were we at this? Also, that's they saw their access changed to secret, a classification used for less sensitive material. In the months after Kushner's clearance was downgraded, Trump badgered aides about the holdup with his daughter and son-in-law, remarking that he didn't see what the issue was in granting them clearances. And this is sort of an interesting part. He didn't see what the issue was because, of course, at the time, the myth was that they were probably going to be returning to New York in the coming months anyway, which is an extraordinarily weak excuse to begin with. And because it's so weak, it's easy to believe Trump believed in using it. What's the problem giving them security clearance? They're out of here pretty soon anyway, which is actually probably a bigger red flag than almost anything. They no longer have anything to lose. Please give them the security clearance. How is that supposed to work? Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We still are on Netroots Radio, it turns out. So that's good. At least the sound was fine. It was just weird. Joan is here and says she was able to hear us all the way in Idaho. So the internet didn't shut down at all, as far as I'm aware. It was just a weird thing. There was no way to really tell whether I was still on the air, because normally I would look and see how is my streaming app working, except I couldn't get it to come up on screen. So I was like, well, maybe it could be working. It just won't tell me. And, yeah, it's odd that, usually when everything freezes like that, the data through flow would be frozen too, but apparently not. So good news for us.
It's a reflection of your professionalism that you were flying blind and did just fine.
Well, all right. I guess that's good. I thought we had a real problem on our hands when I said, all right, well, we got an hour left in the show and I can't read any articles. That's tough. We're going to have a tough time with that one. But okay. Luckily, the phone worked, and I knew you were coming, and you know things, and you can share them. So
and Greg knows things. Greg's very good at knowing
things. All I had to do was spend the half hour or so in between, maybe a little longer, telling. I would have to limit myself to the 2 or 3 things that I knew about that were on my screen by happenstance. Okay, we can do that. That's what this show's about. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I know on my way through that half hour, one of the things that came up was the story of the very many judges that they're pushing through, some of whom are, let's say, considerably less than qualified.
Considerably less than qualified and extremely young.
Yes, that was what I was thinking of. And I didn't have the article at hand and couldn't get to it, so I couldn't remember who is this person that everyone was remarking on as a 37-year-old woman. I think, what did they say, 9 years of legal practice under her belt, a total of 4 cases taken to trial, and now a federal judge for life because reasons.
Unless we figure out a way around that.
Yes.
Allison Jones Rushing.
Okay.
That's her name. She's 37 years old. Fourth Circuit.
Okay.
And
that's me.
Let's see. What is she well known for?
I don't know.
Working with the Alliance Defending Freedom.
Oh, well. Freedom.
That's a conservative Christian group that fights LGBT rights.
Oh, no.
And that the Southern Poverty Law Center says is a hate group.
Oh. Well, those things are bad. It sounds
She's a judge now.
Well, that's what they say. I suppose, like we were saying, there are ways that it could be undone, but it's tough. But I'm wondering whether we can invent new ones or new ways around it that might dilute her influence, certainly.
Yes, this is one of the things that I'm going to be spending the next year and a half thinking about a lot.
Oh, good idea.
What a president and a new Senate majority, should we be so lucky to get one, can do to mitigate the real harm that this is causing. Trump can get as many as 40% of the federal judiciary. That's how much is left vacant, thanks to Mitch McConnell and his machinations against President Obama, forcing so many vacancies.
Yeah,
part of it's just timing. This is just how it worked with retirements. But a lot of it is McConnell's refusing to allow Obama confirmations.
Yeah.
Trump will get about 40% of the judiciary, which is really kind of scary.
Yeah.
It means the Federalist Society actually gets that much of the judiciary, and we all know about the Federalist Society. They're kooks.
Yeah, and I suppose, if more than tax cuts, if you were told all you have to do to remake the judiciary in your own image and have all of the things that you kept losing on because your legal theories are crap, reversed by judges who share those crap legal theories or could be convinced to believe in them, either for money or whatever, or power or prestige, or really actually believe it. What if we replaced half of the judiciary currently in place who don't believe any of your stupid crap with people who said they would. Would you cover up, let's say, the takeover of the United States by a mafia state of international criminals? How about that? Would that be a decent trade? I might be willing to do that. If I ever get in trouble, they'll let me go, kind of thing. Yeah, they might do that, but more to the point, they wouldn't charge you. They wouldn't uphold charging you with any crimes because, you're a white Republican guy, and that's not criminal. So, would that be okay? Well, sounds pretty good. I mean, it's almost as good as a seat on the bench for life. That sets up a young lawyer pretty good. If you're a powerful senator, the ability to get whatever you want and skate on any crimes, and also have all the people that make you think they're icky lose all their rights or be thrown in jail, and so you could be happy and smug about that in retirement. I guess that's important to him, and he's willing to take it.
I guess so.
Sitting here in the Florida sun, knowing that somebody somewhere that I don't like couldn't get married. It's all worth it.
Yeah. It's really disturbing.
Yes.
It's one of my primary wishes for impeachment.
Yeah, I was going to say
I think it's
belief
one of
in
the
hell,
largest goals of impeachment, and the possibility that the illegitimate fruit of a illegitimate president can also be axed.
Yeah, I don't think it's
I don't know that that's been proven, but I
not.
don't think it's extra constitutional.
I don't know. It's one of those I don't know sort of things. It's the sort of thing that ordinarily I would have probably argued against. But hey, norms are weird, and I don't like them anymore, and neither does anybody else. And maybe the reality is, yeah, a president, not just any impeached president, but a president impeached because he was illegitimately installed in the first place, also impeachable because of what he did when he was there, but that's almost neither here nor there in this calculation. Everything he does just gets swept away. That seems awfully destabilizing, but maybe some modified version of that. Or
it is destabilizing, but the other part of it is, in the case of Kavanaugh, I think we might have enough ammunition.
Yes, that's certainly
like
possible.
All the perjury.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of perjury.
That could be used to build a case, certainly.
The money that still hasn't been tracked down, all of that money he used to pay off his mortgage. And
yeah, I was wondering about that the other day, just in terms of was that a big waste of time or money for whoever paid all that, considering clearly there was nothing that was going to stop him from being confirmed, but they didn't know that then. But then afterwards they said, oh man, if I had known that he could be, this kind of sexual miscreant and just bluster his way onto the court, I would never have paid off his mortgage. Who needed that?
Money.
Yeah. Well,
I just see a new tweet about it this morning.
Oh?
$92,000 in country club fees. $200,000 in credit card debt. Those baseball tickets.
Yeah, right.
And his mortgage, $1.2 million. I mean, it's a lot of money here that we just haven't accounted for.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the perjury, not to mention the assault.
Right. And who knows, maybe new 37-year-old judges figuring they'll get the same.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
So
It's a good
whether
gig.
it ends up being doing what they did back after Watergate in 1978 and adding a whole bunch of new seats to the Ninth Circuit, stacking circuits that way to dilute the power a little bit, imposing the judicial code of ethics on the Supreme Court, I think that's a big one. It doesn't get a lot of talk, although it has more since Judge Clarence Thomas and his wife Ginny have been so active in extremist movements.
Yes.
The Supreme Court doesn't have to abide by the code of conduct, the code of ethics, that every other member of the judiciary has to. They're exempt. Because they're supreme.
That's one of those things that comes with being supreme, I guess.
That has to end. And, these are things that a Senate can do. These are things that a Senate really has to do. And it's hard for me to say because I do sort of revere norms and processes and procedures and the institution. But Democrats are going to have to be as ruthless as Mitch McConnell has been.
I guess so.
I mean, an example, they put one through last week, Eric Miller from Seattle, again to the Ninth Circuit. They're really eroding the Ninth as sort of a liberal bastion against Trump. They put on Miller, who's extremely anti-Native American. He has been the go-to lawyer to fight Native Americans. That's what he's known as. That's what he built his career as. He's now on the Ninth Circuit over the objections, not just not turning in their blue slips for him, but objecting to his appointment, Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell from Washington State. Rushing. They had her supposed confirmation hearing during the big fall break, post-election session break.
Yeah, and there was no
there were
Democrats.
No Democrats there. There were like two senators there. That was her supposed confirmation hearing. That's how they voted her out of committee.
All right. I mean, okay. It's not typical, certainly.
I don't want Democrats going that far.
Oh, well then
I want Democrats having the kind of gall to do that.
I see.
And to find ways that are slightly more legitimate to affect the judiciary. And it's going to be hard. But I'm going to be spending a lot of time thinking about it because this is the thing that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Well, legitimacy is a tough thing to preserve in a situation like this. And of course, you'll be accused, no matter what you come up with, of throwing that out the window. But, I guess depending on how ruthless you're going to get.
Made absolutely no difference to Mitch McConnell.
That is true. And it's going to continue happening this way if we continue to say, well, we'll rise above, or we're going to let Pat Leahy chair.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Or whatever.
That's what we learned when the Democrats had the majority under Obama for a few years. And Leahy was being very, very senatorial and said, well, of course we'll respect the minority and allow them to have their blue slips.
Yes.
Which meant they didn't turn in their blue slips.
Right.
And they just, a lot of Republican senators even refused to consult with the White House about vacancies.
Which kept them open, which they now fill with the new process.
By Trump.
Yeah, right. So, it's unfortunate, and we find ourselves in this situation a lot, and a little bit of this discussed yesterday with Armando. This is sort of new wave of people either running for office or offering themselves up as political consultants who came up through and who uses their credentials, fine credentials, service in the Obama administration, only some of whom are now realizing, yes, we need to be ruthless, which you say, well, it wasn't your fault. You were being driven by a boss who was steering you away from that. But then, the other half of them, however, are either running for president or running other people's campaigns under the premise that, well, what we'll do is we'll sit down and work it out with the Republicans. We'll talk and figure things out that way.
John Hickenlooper.
Yeah. Right.
If I just
the latest
sit down
example.
with McConnell and repeat back to him what he's saying to me, we'll be fine.
I guess. I was a little confused by his statement, which
I was very confused by his statement. Howard Schultz coming up with this kind of stuff, you can kind of understand.
Yes, well, sort of.
Because the only attention he's paid to politics in the past 2 years is the fact that a billionaire can become president just on the basis of being a billionaire.
Yes.
That's as much as he knows. Yeah. He hasn't bothered to vote.
He did make everybody write stuff on
he
cups.
He hasn't really been paying enough attention to understand beyond the platitudes about bipartisanship.
Kind of you to give him a pass.
Hickenlooper should know better.
Yeah, you would think. But I don't know.
But, he's going
Does
nowhere.
Not. Yeah, well, I don't know why you would really get in the race at this point. Especially, there's really not even any room in that niche. Even there's plenty of people in the. I'll work it out.
White guy who just wants everybody to get along. Yeah, we have enough of those.
Yeah, right. So.
Well, we have two. We have Hickenlooper and Biden.
We're full on that, guys. So find another niche, I guess. Yeah, his own particular version of the statement being that he would go to his office and say, "Now, what's the issue again?" So I thought that part was really the most astonishing thing. It was dumb enough as it is to say, "Well, I would sit down and work it out with him," but you just said that you would go to his office to work it out with him without actually knowing what the issue was, and that your first statement would be, "What are we talking about?" So why would I have confidence in that? I don't understand anything. Let's work.
And clearly, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Who more than once has proven himself right now the most dangerous man to American democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, really, in so many ways, he's more so than Trump because he's the backstop against Trump and refuses to be that.
Right.
He's allowing all of this to happen.
It is amazing. And like we said, it's infuriating to think that he's doing it all because he hopes to gloat in retirement at the lost rights of others.
It's very hard to know what is motivating McConnell. I mean, he wants to keep his seat.
Yeah, and one day he'll say, "I've had enough. Time for me to retire." And his big legacy will be, "I hated when stuff I wanted to win in court lost, but now it will win. I'm so happy now."
Yeah.
People won't be able to go to school here. Others won't be able to marry. Some people who want to use a bathroom won't be able to. This is great.
And for this, he kept the American public from knowing that Russia was interfering with the election on behalf of Donald Trump.
Right. Because he knew he would get this. But
this
why did he want this?
Would go for this.
Yeah. It must have been really... Well, I guess now you have to... believe them, take them at their word when they say how thoroughly disturbed they are by things like the idea of same-sex marriage. Why, it's keeping me up at night. I guess I didn't think it was true, but I guess maybe it is. I don't think that's a good reason. I mean, you should take a pill or drop dead if that's the problem for you, but not undo it. But for all the talk of freedom and limited government, it seems that the ultimate pipe dream of most of these Republicans is, I gotta get those people who keep winning legal rights. All right, that's weird. I have to do, the Republican platform is the curtailment of the rights of others in the name of limited government.
Essentially the argument of originalists. It's what the founders intended. The founders intended propertied white men to have all of the power.
Well, I suppose that is true.
Unfortunately, all of the powerful white men in power now still see that as the ultimate vision.
Yes, right.
It's there for them and nobody else.
Happens. Because we're more reasonable people than that, and we figured most other people are too. But I guess at bottom, you're right. The founders did want that. And so, to the extent that you think that's the ultimate path, the founders wanted it. There are some of us who say, well, no, that's okay. I mean, some of the things the founders wanted were good. Some of the things they wanted were bad. They didn't know it.
They wanted to own
but
people.
They were. Yeah. Bad thing.
That's a bad thing.
All right.
And, I think probably there's not a small percentage of white male Republicans who think owning people wouldn't necessarily be such a horrible thing. It could be helpful in their lives.
I'm sure, I guess. Yeah. And now they're encouraged to say so. And if it turns out badly for them, they say they're joking. And can't you take a joke or whatever? But then there are others who, say, actually, I feel free to say these things now because of this red hat. I don't know. Not sure how they kind of happened, but all right, so it did. All right. Well, that's a weird thing for sure, and I'm glad to know that you're on the case. And I guess it's going to be really interesting to see well, what you come up with and what others come up with, and whether or not we can make the case that they're legitimate. I mean, I suppose you could just say,
well, we have to make the case that we can come up
Act.
with these ideas, and then we have to make the case to our presidential and Senate candidates for 2020 that this is okay to do.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I think that's going to be the harder part.
Yes. It was very difficult to convince President Obama that there needed to be any action on filibuster reform, and he was always uncomfortable with it, and then eventually, okay, well, my Senate leader says this has to happen, so I'm for it.
Right.
But,
and we still see too many Democratic senators saying, yeah, well, that's the problem we did. We went nuclear on that, and it just unleashed Mitch McConnell to do it more. No, there wouldn't be any Obama judges, or there wouldn't have been Obama nominees in the government had they not.
Yes. I mean...
Oh, and speaking of, we get the mini nuke.
Right.
McConnell's ready to do it, to cut back debate on these nominees from 30 hours to as little as 2 hours.
Right.
Because he's not getting them through fast enough.
Yes. Record pace, but not fast enough.
Yeah.
Well, he's ambitious.
I think it's how he's getting Trump to keep him, to not fight with him, to stop saying mean things about him. It's just keep giving him his judges.
I see. Yeah. I mean, he keeps pestering him to do it, and he uses the nuclear option by name, and I guess dragging it out, but whatever. I guess his holding it as an option, holding it open as an option, has kept him from attacking him.
Yep.
All right.
So that's going to happen this week. We'll see what Susan Collins does.
Yeah. Okay.
I think probably now that there's a bigger cushion for McConnell in the Senate with more Republicans, you're probably going to see Collins deciding to be more mavericky on some of these things.
It'll be very exciting.
To undo some of the damage from the last year. I don't think that's going to work.
Okay. No, she's given herself a tremendous hole to have to find her way out of. With the Kavanaugh vote, and I don't think there's much in the way of small pieces of maverickism that can rebuild that.
Yeah. Here's one interesting thing, though, speaking of the Senate. Mm-hmm. There might be as many as 15 Republican senators who will vote for the disapproval resolution on his national emergency.
Okay.
And let's see, 15, that would get us perilously close to a veto-proof majority, would it not?
That would be pretty close, I guess, which is probably why that's why it's the number that's being discussed. They probably heard it from Mitch McConnell's office, ultimately. There could be as many as 67 minus X votes for it. Okay. So however many there are, I don't remember what we're talking about in terms of numbers.
Yeah, 62. So.
Yeah. So they can have 4 more, I guess, before the peril becomes real. And it's difficult to imagine now. 19. You'd have to get 20 Republicans.
Yeah.
So that's pretty difficult. But that's how many free passes are out there. And
Collins will be one of them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Whenever there can be a free pass, it's going to be her.
Yeah. I wonder if that ever disturbs other senators or whether they're just not interested anyhow. But there must be some who say, how come Collins always gets first bite at the apple? I did happen to see, and I don't know what was behind it at all, but while they were voting on rushing yesterday on the floor, Lindsey Graham getting very snippy with her. At least he looks snippy, and he often does, so it's hard to say that he was actually angry with her, but the conversation they were having did not look comfortable. Well, I hope it's uncomfortable for both of them.
I really wish they were all mic'd.
Yeah, that would really be something. But you just have to kind of...
It would probably be depressing. We'd probably learn how just inane they all are.
No, yeah, that's entirely possible. I did see something else of some interest in the Senate, or at least reported in the Hill, that Grassley is angry. He's angry with Trump. apparently the Trump Treasury Department, he's astonished that in the Senate investigations in which they have demanded bank records relating to the Russia investigation, the Trump Treasury skipped some of the mandatory disclosure and just opted not to give them the documents. And he's very mad now because, as it turns out, the Democrats might have been right about how they are trying to duck responsibility and obstruct justice. And that made him feel bad because he looked silly. And I don't know. I guess that's a new thing for him.
Possibly. Every now and then Grassley pops up with something. He, for instance, now is calling on HHS to investigate reports of sexual abuse against children detainees.
Yes. Okay, well,
every now and then something strikes Grassley as bad. Mm-hmm. And he'll act on it. But Grassley was the other person who made it. He was the one who held the hearing, quote unquote, for Allison Rushing with two people. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, when he has to show up for Trump, he does it, and I guess maybe he's upset. He wants a few free passes too.
Perhaps that's it.
Interesting. Okay. What else happened? We were bumping right up against things. Our time limits here, but
HR 1 in the House for the remainder of the week.
Okay.
And I don't know what they're doing with their anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, whatever resolution.
Yeah, that's not on the schedule today.
They're still fighting over it, apparently. So
okay.
We'll see on that, but the bulk of the time for the remainder of the week is going to be HR 1. That's the big ethics, voting, elections.
Yes.
Campaign finance reform package.
And I see 70-something amendments to that, too. So
74 amendments. Some problems. The ACLU is actually they've come out against the full package.
Oh.
Because of the problems in the Disclose Act being too broad, because, of course, it's, bipartisan, supposedly. On disclosure of all contributions to groups, even like the ACLU or to Planned Parenthood, so they think that those requirements are too broad and problematic.
Okay, well that will confuse the picture a little bit, but okay.
It does a little bit. It'll pass the House. Mitch McConnell will never bring it up. Yeah,
I mean that'll be the fate of all the good stuff, I suppose. But all right, well, at least now we know what the House is doing for the balance of the week. That it would be, I think, a good thing if it pushed the anti-Semitism resolution into further discussion and refinement.
Yes,
if not
that would be
completely
very
off the
important.
table. Yeah, okay, so that's a good way to spend the rest of the week actually doing work. So if you've forgotten in the past few years what it looks like to see Congress working on big legislation and having lots of amendments available on something important, turn on C-SPAN. It's something you haven't seen in several years. So, okay. Well, thanks, Joan, for coming by, and I'm glad everything sounded like it was working on the other end, and that you were able to come in.
But it was all there. We heard it all.
All right. Well, the biggest tragedy of all would have been not being able to answer the phone when you called. Thanks again. Hopefully next week things will move a little smoother, and we'll have lots more, as you know, always to talk about. Thanks for coming by.
You're most welcome.
Appreciate it. Talk to you again next week. And now time to turn things over to Justice, assuming his computer is...
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
All right, let's see what I can pull up here about the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Let's see. Fox is outnumbered. Was shocked the Democrat on the panel identified with the Democrats. You won't be surprised about that. But on the rest of the menu, NASA tried to fly a pollution spotting plane over Houston. Guess what happened? We'll find out more next.